All right. So today we're diving into something really interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting. We're talking about attention sensationalism and how the internet has become this breeding ground for outrageous stuff.
Yeah.
Um, you shared a really insightful article with us,
Right?
and it really got me thinking, like, why are we so drawn to these exaggerated stories?
You know, it's funny you should mention that. It
Yeah.
actually, the article connects this back to something we learn as kids.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Tell me more.
Okay, so
I'm intrigued.
think about Dr. Seuss's book,
Yeah.
and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street.
Okay.
That story keeps getting wilder and wilder with each retelling right.
Right.
Turns out it's a perfect example of how we as kids
Yeah.
learn to embellish stories to grab attention.
It's so true.
Yeah.
You're right. The boy in the book just keeps adding those crazy elements to his story.
Right.
It's like a simple true story wasn't interesting enough. Like we're programmed for drama even as kids.
Exactly. And that desire for attention doesn't disappear when we get older. Right.
If anything, the internet makes it even stronger.
Totally.
Social media is like the ultimate digital Mulberry Street.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Everyone is trying to make their lives out to be more exciting, more dramatic than they actually are.
More unbelievable, too.
Yes.
It's true. It's like this competition for likes and shares.
Right.
But the problem is this need for attention can sometimes have serious consequences.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially when you bring misinformation into the picture.
Yeah.
The article calls it a misinformation feedback loop.
Right.
And honestly, that sounds kind of terrifying.
Yeah, it can be.
What exactly does that mean?
So it means that platforms like YouTube are actually designed in a way that encourages misinformation to spread.
Oh, wow.
More views, more clicks, more shares. That all means more money for the people making the content.
Right.
It's all about engagement. And sadly, sensationalism drives engagement.
So it's almost like creators are being encouraged to put those shocking headlines and crazy claims above
Yes.
actual truth.
You got it. And it creates this vicious cycle. The more outrageous a claim, the more clicks it gets.
Wow.
Even if it's totally made up.
Right.
It's like the digital version of if it bleeds, it leads. But it's happening at a global scale with real-world effect.
And it's not just about those fake videos or clickbait headlines, is it?
Right.
The article brought up the freedom movement.
Okay.
And I'm curious to see how this all works in a movement that's supposed to be about finding the truth.
That's what makes this so tricky. Even movements that have good intentions, like the freedom movement,
Right.
can get caught up in this trap of sensationalism.
Yeah.
They can end up spreading misinformation without meaning to, which makes their message weaker and makes real change harder to achieve.
So it's like they're working against themselves, kind of.
In a way, yes.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Take a look at all those hurricane conspiracy theories that pop up.
Wait a second. Hurricane conspiracy theories?
Yeah.
You mean like people actually think that hurricanes are man-made?
As crazy as it might sound, those theories are out there and they actually gain traction online.
Wow.
They give these simple, attention-grabbing explanations for complex events, and that can be appealing even if they completely lack any real scientific backing.
Okay, my mind is kind of blown right now.
Yeah.
But seriously, what's the harm in people believing those theories? It's not like it's hurting anyone, right?
Well, on the surface, it might seem pretty harmless.
Right.
But the problem is when these theories become popular,
Yeah.
they kind of distract from the real issues, you know?
Okay.
Like climate change and the importance of being prepared for disasters.
Yeah.
Instead of having like productive conversations about these challenges,
Right.
we end up getting stuck in these debates about whether the government is controlling the weather or not.
Right.
It's a distraction that can be really harmful.
Yeah, I totally see what you mean. It's like that saying,
Right.
don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Exactly.
It's never been more true.
It's so true.
But sometimes it feels almost impossible to tell what's true and what's not.
I agree.
And when you're constantly bombarded with all this stuff, it's tempting to just tune it all out.
Yeah, you hit on something really important there.
Yeah.
The article calls this truth fatigue,
Right.
and it's a growing problem. Think of it this way. You read one too many crazy headlines. You see one too many doctored videos.
Right.
And eventually your brain just gets overloaded.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, it's like it throws its hands up and says, I can't even deal with this anymore.
Oh, totally. I feel that. It's information overload on steroids.
Exactly.
And when you get to that point of fatigue,
Yeah.
how do you even know what to trust anymore? Everything starts to seem questionable, even things that probably shouldn't.
Exactly. And that's where things start to get really risky.
Yeah.
This constant exposure to misinformation erodes the trust we have in institutions and experts.
Wow.
even in each other.
Yeah.
It creates this environment where it feels like anything goes, and that's incredibly damaging, not just on a personal level, but for society as a whole.
So we've talked about how this misinformation loop works,
Mm,
how it shows up even in movements that say they're fighting for the truth,
right.
and how it all leads to this truth fatigue.
Exactly.
It's honestly a lot to take in, and to be honest, a little overwhelming. What can we even do about it? It feels like such a huge problem.
It is a massive problem,
Right.
but you're not powerless.
Okay.
The article actually offers some practical tips for navigating this online world.
Okay, good.
And it all starts with becoming more aware of the information we consume.
Okay, that makes sense. But where do we even begin?
It starts with questioning everything.
Okay.
Don't just accept things at face value, especially online.
Right.
When you see a shocking headline or some crazy claim, ask yourself, where is this information coming from? Is this a credible source? Is there any real proof to back up this claim, or is it just speculation and guesses?
So basically be skeptical and don't just hit the share button without thinking.
Exactly. We've fallen into this habit of sharing things just because they're shocking or outrageous.
Right.
Without really thinking about the source or what might happen because of it.
Oh, for sure.
Remember, even if you're not the one making up the misinformation sharing it, it still makes you part of the problem.
That's a really good point.
Uh-huh.
It's easy to forget that we have a responsibility to be careful about what we put out there.
Yeah.
But let's be real, not everyone has time to fact-check everything they see online.
Right,
We'd be
but
busy all day.
You're right. It's not about fact-checking every single thing. That would be impossible. It's more about being choosy about the sources you decide to trust.
Okay.
And this is where finding reliable sources of information is super important.
And the article specifically talked about investigative journalists like James Corbett as a good example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Corbett is someone who really represents what good journalism is all about.
Okay.
He's known for being very careful about where he gets his information. He's committed to being transparent.
Right.
And he's willing to tackle complicated and often controversial topics with nuance and depth.
So it's not enough to just be skeptical of what we see online. We should also actively look for sources like James Corbett,
Yes.
people who prioritize facts and being transparent.
Absolutely.
It's about being a smart consumer of information,
Right.
which, let's face it, can feel like a full-time job these days.
Yeah, I hear you. It definitely takes effort.
It does.
But think about it this way. Every time you make the choice to read a well-researched article
Okay.
or listen to a podcast that focuses on evidence-based reporting or watch a documentary that really digs into a complicated issue,
Right.
you're making a statement.
Yeah.
You're telling those algorithms, this is the kind of stuff I care about. This is what I want to see more of.
Right. So we're talking about shifting our attention on purpose
Yes.
and hopefully influencing in some way the type of content that gets shared more online,
Exactly.
using quality over just clicking on whatever's flashy.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe those algorithms will start to get the message. But even if it feels like a small change, remember, your choices matter.
Yeah.
You have the power to be a more careful consumer of information, and that's huge.
This deep dive has been seriously eye-opening.
Good.
Before we wrap things up,
Okay.
any last thoughts for our listeners out there on how to handle this online world where sensationalism seems to be king?
Absolutely. The next time you come across a shocking headline or a story that seems too good to be true,
Right.
just take a breath. Remember everything we talked about today.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, is this exaggerated? Where's the proof? What's the motive behind this information?
Right.
By asking these questions, you're not just protecting yourself from all the misinformation out there.
Right.
You're actually becoming part of the solution. You're becoming a more informed, more discerning, more empowered participant in this digital world.
It's about taking back our attention and focusing it on sources and information that value truth and understanding.
Exactly.
So next time you're scrolling online, remember what we talked about today. Be curious, be critical, and as always, stay informed.